Hello, welcome to Empathetic Educators. I'm your host, Naomi Toland, and today we are joined by the amazing Rose Hipkins, who is one of the chief researchers for education here in New Zealand. A little bit about Rose Hipkins. She has authored some amazing reads, which I've included in my further readings on my blog. One of the ones I really enjoyed reading was Weaving a Coherent Pathway, and that's all about understanding the future education basically, so that's a really great read that you can look at. Today we are talking about the changing world and the changes in education and how we can kind of understand that and guide that better in our schools. And I just wanted to go a little bit into some of the technical terms that we kind of use a little bit, because it's all about research and, well, not all about research, but a little bit about research. And Rose starts off by talking about quantitative data, which is basically just about quantities. So it's like testing, times tables tests, and basically something that has a quantity to it. And we also talk about qualitative data, which is all about qualities. So how determined someone can be to solve a problem. And the reason why I think that's important is because traditional ways of teaching was basically focused a lot on the end result and the end grade and the testing. But more modern ways of thinking really focuses on bringing that quantitative, that testing, mixed in with the qualitative, which is the qualities of being determined, being a risk taker, and that's what modern society needs. And I think this conversation is really important, and I wanted just to go through the technical terms really, because I didn't want you to get scared off by those, because there's a really great message that it's not just for teachers, it's not just for people who understand those terms, it's actually for the parents and the researchers and all the people who are looking to understand a bit more as to what education's looking like for the future. And I think I feel really passionate towards this because coming from the UK system, it's really different. I was going to say weird, but it's not weird, it's more just different. That change of a system which is very focused on testing. There's testing in year 2, there's testing in year 6, so it's all working towards that testing. Coming to a system where there is no standardized testing, and I personally, this is just my own opinion, I really think that the system where there isn't as much testing is really great for what I think towards education and what the future is like. But it has been really great to see that there is pockets, even though the UK system is very focused on testing, there is pockets of promise all across the UK where people are trying to, there is testing that they do, but that's not their main goal, that's not their main emphasis throughout the school. But it's just been weird to see where there's a system across the whole of a country that isn't focused on testing. That's been really cool to be part of that system as well, and compare and contrast different things that I really like about the UK system and I really like about the New Zealand system. But the thing that I really like about here is that they're asking those questions. You're part of the conversation as to what's needed for the actual education system as a whole. And you can contribute, like they put things out into the public where you can have your say towards it, and you feel like they're asking you questions as to what is needed. But there is no answer yet. That's one thing I will say, is that it feels like we're on that journey, and there's definitely not one answer. Even though there's no testing, there's not one answer in the country, and that's what I really like about being part of that as well here. So yeah, that's just my opinion, that's just where I'm at in my journey of teaching. But I think this is what leads into, it's a bit of a longer introduction this morning, but it kind of leads into that, what we're going to talk about today with Rose, like with future education, about that quantitative, that qualitative data, and why it's important to have both testing as well as the qualities that is needed for education and for the future. Because companies, like we know, aren't just looking for academics anymore. They're actually looking for creativity. They're actually looking for being adaptable, and those are set you aside from just having academics or not having academics. So yeah, I'll let you hear what Rose says now, and I hope you enjoy it just like I enjoyed having the conversation with her.
I think it is really important that we change our mindset towards what counts as valid evidence. There's a long-established tradition of using quantitative data. We all know how tests work, and we have this feeling in our mind that they're objective and fair, and that qualitative data is subjective and more reliant on the meaning that the teacher makes out of it, and that some teachers will judge it more leniently than others, and all those sorts of reservations. And of course there's a basis for those reservations, but what people don't see is that quantitative data is not a level playing tools are not a level playing field for all kids, and that there are subjective and value-based judgments under what sorts of questions go into a quantitative tool, and that they have their subjective elements to them too. So the question's not quite as straightforward and easy. It's not a straightforward binary like we make it out to be. One of the other things I think that's really important is that quantitative stuff lends itself most easily to coming at the end of a unit of work when it's actually too late often to do anything, to have another chance at fixing up that learning, whereas qualitative data, because it's gathered very close to the learning, it's possible for students to have another go, fix things up, try again. So if you want assessment for learning, and I know that's what we're going to talk about next, then actually you've got to get practice at making good judgments from what you notice, and that is going to be qualitative. You can notice patterns in quantitative data too, but that's not the question we're talking about today, is it?
It's going deeper actually in the response from the kids and actually reflecting back. Because I think that's what we've seen is the videos is getting the kids, it's not just us reflecting for them, they're actually reflecting for themselves as well, so they can actually look and see what they've done and talk about it. They can talk about their tests, but I think them thinking about their own actions and the metacognition type of it, like them actually thinking about what they're going to do next, like that definitely helps.
There's a very big difference between looking at what you've done and saying, well, I learned this, and these are the aspects that I feel that I've got better at, and saying, well, I got 8 out of 10. There's just a slight difference in the amount of information you get out of those different things and how much they mean to you.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll see a shift in the way people view it, I suppose. I think that'll be the exciting part now, is actually seeing what people can come up with.
I mean, that's not to say that there aren't legitimate questions about comparability to address, because we do need for students to feel that that sense of progress that they're making is a valid judgment. So there are those issues of validity and reliability to be addressed, and they're not simple and they're not straightforward, but they're not as simple and straightforward here as we make them out to be either on the quantitative side.
So it's trying to bring them both together as well, isn't it? Trying to see where
I think triangulation is always a very useful thing to do. And the other very useful tool is moderation. I know that people tend to think about it as a work burden, and it is extra work, let's face it. But the more that people come to a common understanding of what they're looking for, then the more consistent their judgments will be. It's as simple as that.
We've actually found that having that shared language, I think that's definitely helped with building that voice, because I think whenever we started to try and get the kids to record themselves, and they didn't really see the why behind it, but then they started seeing themselves grow in confidence because they had that vocabulary. I think that's what, if you have that shared language, the teachers as well as the children, I think that definitely helps.
So there's teachers talking the same language as each other, and then there's teachers and students talking the same language as each other. Really
Talk with for ages with them. We'll move on to the next question. We've just said that New Zealand is not alone in struggling to introduce and sustain assessment for learning. As a person that's come from a system that's very prescribed and heavily focuses on testing and results, I've really enjoyed actually coming to New Zealand and just seeing the free flow aspect of it, but also you have like a curriculum that you can focus on as well. So I think with the national standards, it's been quite nice to be part of that. But some people might think that a more scaffolded and fixed approach may help with the sustainability of assessment for learning. What's your thoughts on that?
Assessment for learning is a fantastic idea in principle,
Yeah.
and you probably wouldn't find anybody who disagreed with that. But the devil's always in the detail. Perhaps if I use an anecdote that helps to illustrate this. I remember when I was a classroom teacher myself, I always knew intuitively that kids didn't get dissolving.
Yeah.
That they simply didn't understand what this. On one level, they knew you put something in water, you stir it, disappears, it's dissolved. Of course, they knew that.
Yeah.
But what was actually happening? And then some years later, when I was working in teacher education, I read a piece of research that actually explained 6 different ways kids can understand dissolving.
Okay.
And I thought, now I get it. Now I know why my kids didn't get it and what I could have done next. But I didn't know when I was a classroom teacher. So that's the rub of assessment for learning. A great idea in principle, but you've got to have such deep knowledge of where the learning difficulties lie that to really bring that principle to life is much easier said than done.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we should give up on it. I think it's worthy of every effort that we can give it and make it, but it's a work in progress, I suspect, across the whole of your career. And ideally, what you'd like to see is teachers who got better and better and better at doing it as they learned more of those sort of aha things. Yeah.
It's kind of like
young teachers. Yeah.
So it's like, it's not really, you don't have to scaffold it as such, but it's more actual subject knowledge that helps you go deeper as well, isn't it?
It's
both them
what
going
they
together.
call pedagogical content knowledge, where the difficulties are likely to lie and what they look like. Having said that, because I've just done a systematic piece of work on assessment trends in the literature for the Ministry of Education, I do know that there's a very clear message in the literature that a country, a system, can intend to put assessment for learning in place and be sincere about that. But if the high stakes assessment regime, if there is one in place, it will cut across assessment for learning every time and be the more important thing. And that kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Because I think that's what I'm saying about coming from a place where it's all focused on just test. That's what you're aiming for, that's what you're working for, that's a cycle. You're more just thinking about that end goal of that, not about the assessment for learning that continue to happen throughout the lessons and throughout your whole year. That's what you're always focusing on, that end, rather than the continual process of it, isn't it?
But the focus is it's like we were talking about the qualitative and the quantitative, because those tests will be quantitative and they will be at the end.
Exactly.
And what's valued is where the teacher has got all the kids to, not the journey along the way. And what you lose there might be this kid who was way back here and got to here, and they'll still do really badly in the test. That gain they've made will never be acknowledged in that system. And that's the dilemma that the trend towards reporting progress is about. In terms of social justice, it's just fairer because every kid has a chance, no matter where they start from, to have their learning gains acknowledged. And while it's easy for us to see the problem for the students who start lower and under the system where you only look at the end, they are always marked as being left behind. It is actually also a problem for very able students who do very well in these tests, because if they started here and they aced this test, how do you know they couldn't have been here if actually their learning had been geared towards the progress they're making?
It's also setting up for possibly a failure in life, because these children who are trying and building that resilience towards keep on going, you find sometimes whenever the children haven't really had to try or make that effort in the high grades,
Absolutely.
there are lower levels of resilience because they're
Yeah.
used to kind of getting all those things right as well. So
Yeah,
it's
that's right. I often think about this group, and it's easy for them, and they don't have to make an effort to
Yeah.
do it. And then as soon as something becomes ambiguous or uncertain, they're all at sea
Yeah.
because they're not the first fastest knowers anymore, and their whole identity is invested in being that. I have a certain sympathy for that because I suspect that possibly I would have been described that way, and learning to be more resilient and to embrace and tolerate uncertainty has been a hard thing.
I think
for
that's
me
why
to do.
I'm so passionate in like this kind of area, because I came from that kind of circle as well. And I came out with my first year teaching, I was like, right, I'm going to know everything, I'm going to do everything. But then I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm doing. And I wasn't used to that kind of failure as such.
Yeah.
So it was just a big shock to my whole system. That's why I got so passionate, because I was like, how do I do this? Like, what is it? How do I do this failure? How do I deal with it? What am I doing? So I thought
First year of teaching is a test of resilience for everybody.
a big hard shock of life. It's like,
It sure is.
But I think that kind of leads in. I don't really know about that next question, but a lot of parents, we had Meet the Teacher last week, and a lot of our parents kind of are a bit confused. They get why we're doing learning qualities. They get why we're kind of building resilience, talking about capabilities. But their voice says, yeah, we're doing that in primary school, but secondary school and university kind of aren't set up for that just yet, or kind of they're making their ways towards that. Their concerns are, I get where their concerns are coming from, but what do you think, with the loss of the national standards and that way, what do you think kind of helps schools get set up for that transition?
Well, in terms of secondary schools, I think it's a watch this space, really.
Yeah.
Because we've had the decision about the national standards and the return to putting the curriculum in the forefront in primary school. But of course, there is a parallel conversation happening now around the NCEA in the secondary school. I don't know enough about the tertiary sector, although I do suspect that in a lot of degrees in the tertiary sector, and I'm only talking about degree learning, I know nothing about the vocational learning sector, or not enough to make a comment on it, but I think in a lot of degrees they do have a focus on those learner qualities and the sort of people that we need for the world of work. Not all of them, but I do think that trend is there, and of course it's there in some secondary schools as well. There isn't one universal pattern for them, but the dominance of NCEA in the secondary sector is the thing that's the nut that we need to crack to make the equivalent progress in that sector, I think.
And I think you're right, like it's watch this space, because it doesn't seem like it's going to change overnight, and primary schools haven't changed overnight either. It's just that people are definitely having that conversation. I think that's what's exciting about New Zealand for me, is the fact that the conversation's happening. It's actually like people are coming, secondary schools, people are coming together with primary schools and seeing how they can actually make those things, the shifts happen.
I think the reason it's perceived as such high stakes and generates so much anxiety is you have to remember under the previous system where we had exams like school certificate and bursary and so on, and other countries have their equivalent of that always was a gatekeeper. So you do well in that, you can go this way, you don't, you go that way. And I think people still put that type of gatekeeping lens over the NCEA, even though it wasn't supposed to be like that. I don't think we had an explicit enough conversation about not doing that when it was developed.
I suppose like the world's changing as well with gatekeeping, just in general. Like I seen a thing on Facebook where there's a boy back home and he's earning $17 million, £17 million from like doing reviews about toys. So
when you said the world's changing, what I wanted to say is, some kids just walk right round the gates.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, course, there have always been people who've done that. A lot of very entrepreneurial people love to say that they bottomed out in the previous system because they had other sorts of qualities that were rewarded in life. But those people are very much the exception. There's a lot more people now who can just walk around the gates. They're much alternative pathways.
It's more accessible, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it goes back to what we're saying about resilience. I think that definitely is that tool of, if they weren't doing well in the gatekeeping system, they were able to think about some way and like being adaptive and think about some other way. So it's and that's probably happening more. So building those soft skills are more important as well, isn't it? Like kind of that maybe might be a way of talking to parents about that reasoning behind it as well. So like obviously we're still doing those basic facts, doing those handwriting and supporting them to get to university if that's their path. But there's so many other paths now that it's kind of unknown as well, some of the paths that we can't really prepare them for.
There's a lot more complexity in our social world than we were accustomed to thinking about. It probably always was more complex than we thought about, but it's much more in our consciousness now, how complex it is, and the same is true of the natural world, which is still what it was, but we are much more aware of its complexity, and of course it's changing so fast and generating so many more uncertainties that we've got no choice but to actually build these different qualities, coping with uncertainty, learning about risk. And
I think that's, I get why parents have that voice, because they're uncertain as well. Like they haven't seen that, like the fruition of what actually what this system happening. It's kind of, we're in the process of it happening at the minute, so it's kind of believing in the system that's actually unknown. I think that's kind of why they're maybe questioning a lot about, like, what does this mean? What is this, like, what's going to happen with this?
Parents are caught in an interesting bind, aren't they? Because their own experience of what an education system should be is their schooling. And that's fine. That's what they bring to looking at their students' experience. But at the same time, if you ask them what was different about the world now from when they were at school, they'll be able to tell you lots of things. But their felt intuition is that this shouldn't have changed, even while all that did.
Exactly.
So it's just a matter of stopping and thinking about that.
That's actually a really good point. Talking about reflecting on what has changed to make us have to change and adapt as an education system. That's a good. That's a fair point. No, it's crazy. And same as teachers as well. It's trying to get teachers. We've all gone through the system. Like, we've never gone through this type of system, so it's trying to trust in that type of way of teaching as well, even though we haven't gone through it with ourselves too. So it's
there's actually quite a lot of research to say how hard it is to change your way of being in the classroom once it's established, because anyone who's been a teacher knows how complex the job is, and if you've never been one, I think you can't begin to know, really. And so once you've established that way of being as a teacher in your world, it's really, really hard to change it.
Well, like we said, your first year teaching is one of the hardest years you have. So if you work that hard to get to what you think is right, and then you're just like, well, what? It's different. What are you talking about? It's hard to kind of make those changes as well, isn't it? So it's a crazy world that we're in at the minute, but exciting as well. Well, before we go, we have the top tips takeaway, where we get tips to take away, and you get a little takeaway as a little pastry. So you get a takeaway as well. Just having a little thought about what 3 things you think or you wish maybe parents or teachers would know when dealing with what we're talking about. Maybe just 3 kind of single things that we could take away and try and cogitate on while the unknown future is happening and this way of education is happening. Or 4 or 5 or 2 or 1.
No pressure. One of the things that I really wish parents and people in the community more generally would know is that a curriculum is not a shopping list of content. That actually it's a much more complex structure than that that's about how and why you organise the learning experiences of kids that you think are valuable. Because if you think about it as a shopping list of content, then what's wrong with the quantitative test at the end?
It's like a tick, 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 like you have to do it rather than actually the journey of what we're talking about, of actually going through it.
And those more complex goals and where they come from, so probably doesn't make a lot of sense. And I wish we could collectively develop a better language for talking about learning and what learning is and the complexities of learning, because learning is one of those words that we all use and we all think we're talking about the same thing, and it's very easy for us to talk past each other because there's layers and layers of understanding to the complexity of what learning is.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for coming and joining us, Rose. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. And that's everything for today. Thank you. Love that conversation. One of my biggest takeaways was the fact that obviously we're talking about changes in education. And Rose says that if we kind of understand that obviously looking at the world now compared to what it was like 10, 50 years ago, how can we expect education to be exactly the same and to keep having to do the exact same way of learning if the world's changed so significantly, even in the past 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? We need to be going with that as well. But one thing we did really talk about was empathising and understanding why people are asking those questions, because it is a big, big change and a big, big shift from the education that we've all grown up with. And even if you're a teacher, if you're a parent, if you're anything to do with education, if it's changing that much, then obviously we're going to ask why. And it shows that we care, that we're not just saying, okay, go with it, go with the flow. It actually shows that we care about our children if we are saying, okay, wait, stop, what is the next thing? Wait, stop, why are you doing that? And I think that's why it's really important to have those open connections, especially with parents. As a teacher, I actually really like those conversations. They can be a bit challenging, because obviously we're coming from a place where there is tension even for educators as well. So the most important part is, again, like Henry said last week, understanding, not judging, and trying to understand both parties and trying to understand both places, because we are at the end of the day just trying to have what's best for the learners and for the children. And I think even though it is a less prescribed place with the less testing, that's what scares us as well, is if you are used to teaching in a certain way and a certain script to follow, that's very daunting to have that script almost taken away. And what does it look like? What does education look like? What does the system look like? And it can be very tricky and very challenging. But what comes next? It almost feels like we're almost in like this limbo type place where we don't know, but it's changing for the better, so that our learners are ready for the future that is unknown as well. And that kind of links to our interview with Mark Treadwell a couple of sessions ago, where he was talking about concepts and connecting subjects and giving that real life experiences that support learners to think about themselves in the future as well as in the now, and helping parents understand that as well, and helping other teachers understand that. Because obviously I'm not sitting here having the answer, but just being part of that conversation and learning more and knowing more, that's what we need to be doing more together. So yeah, I really enjoyed that conversation towards thinking about the future, because we need to start understanding it, like I said, understanding, not judging. And I think that I would love to connect a bit further with you guys on what you think or what your reflections were, because I know it is a tricky subject, and I know it is challenging for a lot of us, and it would be cool to, if you can think about what got your brain buzzing, because like I said, I'm not feeling the complete greatest today, so you'll notice in my nose and you'll hear it in my voice, but it still got me so excited. Like, even just thinking about it and getting all the resources together, it's just been really, really good for me as my reflection to look more into those documents and look more into what it could look like or what the research is saying. And hopefully I've put those little sections in there so you can reflect in the different areas as well. So if anything got your brain buzzing, you can type in #buzzingbrains to get in contact, or you can contact me on Twitter at Naomi_Toland, or you can find my other details as well as some other links on createeducate.com on my website. And I look forward to hearing from you. Hope you have a good week and you're feeling a lot healthier than what I've been feeling. Enjoy. Bye.